It's flexibility and fluidity within ourselves. It's being able to slow down enough to have a checkpoint. Like, how are you?
Hello and welcome back. Now, just before we get started, if you're watching this on the Total Somatics YouTube channel, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and press the notification bell. So every time an episode is released, you're the very first to find out. Today, and this very special guest, we go back many years. And because this is the 200th, I can't even get my words out today, 200th episode of Somatic Movement and Mindset, I thought I need to bring someone in incredibly special who was with the two of us were together at the start of this journey of creating podcasts, and that's Dr. Sarah Wilson. So I'm going to bring Sarah in a moment, and I'm going to let Sarah tell you a little bit about her, because if you're not sure who Sarah is, she's a very, very skilled, intelligent, smart, inspirational woman. But Sarah and I, back in 2019, we've done 2 seasons, and then it was 2020, a very momentous year for us all. We had a podcast called Really Well Women. So you can still get hold of Really Well Women on all of the different podcast platforms. So do check that out, because there's conversations and discussions we've had is going to be similar to what we're going to do today. I've got a few notes, but we're going to see where this conversation goes. It's probably going to go in different directions to what we've got written down. With further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Sarah, and I'm going to say, hello, stranger. How are you? Let us know a bit of what you've been doing since we last got together.
We were joking a second ago. I've been very productive. Yes, hello everyone. I am Dr. Sarah Wilson. I am a naturopathic doctor in Canada. So I live in Ontario, Canada, and I own Advanced Women's Health. So our business at Advanced Women's Health really is setting new standards for women's healthcare in Canada. I think the healthcare system in Canada, depending on where you were and where you sit in the world, has a lot of very differing opinions, right? Some people think it's amazing because it's a quote unquote free healthcare system. And some people recognize the innate challenges with that. And honestly, there's a lot of challenges when it comes to women's health. And so we have grown really rapidly over the last few years because we're filling that gap. We are providing people with deep investigations and evidence-based care, and really just offering them the opportunity to get to know their body at a deeper and more holistic level. So that is me. We, over the last few years, we now have 8 locations. So time is flying and things are growing. I also have 2 kiddos. So I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old now. So I have been productive in that way as well. And that is why this conversation about resilience, I think, is such an important one, because it's very few days go by in a week where someone doesn't say to me, like, how do you do it? And how do you get all of these things done? And it's about taking care of myself, but it's about support and resourcing. And so I think this is such a huge conversation to be having, because people are more burnt out than ever. The statistics are not great, right? There's a lot of people that are really struggling, but there's also a lot of people in that category who were like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not struggling anymore. Like, I need to listen to things, resource myself, educate myself. I need to go about things differently so that I can achieve my goals and feel great in my body and not burn myself into the ground. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into this today.
Oh, well, it's brilliant. And I think what we want to do is talk from 2 perspectives, really, because you and I, since we did Really Well Women, which was, and I always remember it because it was the start of the bushfires here in the start of 2020. Do you remember? It was awful. And then it just kicked off and got worse, really. But it was since 2020, you and I have basically head down, bottom up, doing a lot of work in different hemispheres, haven't we? And so I want to discuss really today, and it's just going to kind of evolve this conversation really on how not just professionally, because we've had lots going on, but personally, because there's such a crossover. And I want this really to resonate with everybody. And because of that somatic movement element that's within this podcast, that's why I thought the resilience factor is incredibly important to focus on. And I know it's used a lot. It kind of becomes a bit of an inward, doesn't it? Like other expressions can be. But just want us to consider like how we've grown both, and you and I behind the scenes have kind of messaged each other over the time, haven't we? Which is, so it's not like this is just brand new. We've got to know what's been going on behind the scenes. But how would you say that you've built your resilience over the years? Because I know we messaged a while ago and I think you were on a flight back from somewhere on the other side of Canada. And then I had something going on. And it was the time that I was like, oh man, I think we've both just got a lot going on, and it just gets full on, doesn't it? So how do you manage that?
Even last week, I was out in BC on the other side. I was on the other coast, right? Just traveling back and forth to different clinics, seeing them, because we will be coast to coast in the next 3 to 5 years. We're in Ontario and BC right now, but we are expanding quickly.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is that we love what we do. There's such a passion, but then we have to manage it because we get excited and so passionate about it, because we are just very fortunate that what we're passionate about and we love is what we do as our career. We're very fortunate. So I think we have to kind of manage our boundaries between making sure we have a rest and we recuperate, isn't it? Because it's things that we're doing in the background. And I just have to, again, think, it'll happen. Sometimes we want it all happening straight away, but sometimes there's such a power in pausing and just waiting, because sometimes you just have that little bit of extra time to think things through, don't you? And then your ideas come, and then you get a better timeline, and you think, actually, I think I'm going to be able to cope with that better because of my physical health and managing relationships, and here in the clinic, ensuring that I'm attentive to the therapists that are here, as well as all of my clients and my clients online. So there's a lot of balls that we have to juggle, isn't it? So what do you do to kind of manage that and that resilience factor?
Well, it's interesting because I always say, you get these conversations at the exact right moment every time. So 2023 was probably the quote unquote busiest year I've ever had. But I was also in one of the best spaces I had been mentally and physically since way before my children. And so it was such a good reminder for me that you can hold both, but it has to be done specifically, right? So, and then I'll caveat that to what's happened the last few weeks when you don't take good care of yourself, right? Because you could go to both spaces. But my belief structure is that there's only 5 to 7 causes of disease. Okay. And within that, they're all fundamentally and foundationally sources of stress in your body. So we have blood sugar imbalances and insulin. We have gut issues. We have inflammatory issues. We have nutrient deficiencies. We have hormonal and energy production imbalances. We have the nervous system, right? So when we're talking about resilience, we think about the nervous system, right? Stress responses, anxiety, mood, depression, how you're feeling in your body. And that is one of the types of stress response. And I have a visual, so it's like the base of my pyramid, right? It's a critical stress response. But the reality is, for so many of us, we can't hold a lot of nervous system stress because we have gut bacterial issues and inflammation and blood sugar stress. So it's like we're all one bucket. You can only handle so much. So if you are dealing with the other sources of stress, then you can handle more pressure, right, in life. But if you are not handling other sources of stress, if you're not balancing your blood sugar, if you're not intentional about bacterial issues, if you're not on top of yourself, then that can fall, right? And so that's really how I work to build resilience. Is I say, okay, first and foremost, what are these issues that I don't need to deal with? Where can I hold a mindset? Like I have Post-it notes all over, right? That are like, you need to fight for your opportunities, not for your limitations, right? Like I'm intentional about my mindset, but I'm also really, really intentional about curating health. And so recently, our family was sick, honestly, from December until about a month ago. Like someone was always sick. There was a flu rocking around. I was really busy onboarding new staff, letting people go, restructuring a lot of our leadership team. And so not last week, but the week before, I ended up with such severe pelvic pain, I was in the hospital. right? And now, in that period of time, did I feel particularly stressed? Did I feel, no, I just wasn't eating as specifically as I normally do. We had immune stress, right? And I was pushing it. I was pushing it. And I wasn't taking my supplements. So as soon as I started taking my supplements, realized what needed to happen, got back on track in a lot of ways, my body rebounded again because it has that resilience. I didn't F up the foundation, you know what I mean? I just shook the windows. But that to me is what resilience is. Resilience is understanding that we are one bucket and understanding what our sources of stress are and making a decision about what we can handle and take on based on all of those sources of stress. If your blood sugar is a mess, you cannot choose big projects. If everyone's sick at your house, you're going to have immunological stress. So I really think it's an empowering lens to look at life through because it's very much balanced. It's not saying that mental emotional stress is bad, especially when you're passionate about it. You know what I mean? You can give it in life, but you need to maintain your health in the process to achieve those things. So yeah, that's my very long definition, but I think it
It's
hits
brilliant.
home for a lot of people.
It does, and it's brilliant because the other thing is though, when you were saying that, a lot of things that kept putting into my mind as well is that it's creating that embodiment. So coming back and checking all the time because we're discussing this, and you were going through the whole winter season. So it's kind of, as you
Mhm.
say, it's like we live in different seasons with our body, and it's having that embodiment, coming back to that self-awareness to think, hang on, maybe I just need to pace myself a bit more. I know this time of the year everyone's got the coughs and the colds, and in the families it just goes round and round. And it's looking at the rituals and the habits and thinking, actually,
Yeah,
you
you
know
pay
what I'm,
for daycare and perpetual
I
flu,
know.
that's for sure.
Oh my, it's a nightmare, an absolute. Um, and it's that sign. It's the kind of thing though that you look and you think, well, I know there's probably, and I know this, like, I don't know. I think it maybe it's because everything closed down for a couple of years, and we shut down even the domestic borders. But for 2 years, my husband and I were, we were constantly sick. It was like we were taking turns. It was really bad. And yet we've always been really healthy. And I just think you get these little blips, don't you? And it's the resilience as well. The word like flexibility comes into it as well, because your nervous system and your body is up and down all the time. And when it's up and down all the time, it is all these different factors that come in. I mean, we're not always going to be 100% healthy. It's not like we're always going to be 100% happy. We have different emotions all the time, and that's what we experience. But we also have different physiological, lots of feedback that comes from our body. Sometimes we feel a bit rubbish, other times we feel really good. And that kind of reflects in how we're feeling with our health as well, doesn't it? Sometimes we might be a bit windy, but it depends on what we've eaten the day before. Other times we feel really well. And it's just that I think I always say somas exist in time, and in somatics we kind of say our whole being is the soma, and it does exist in time. So it's like when we do that, we're less hard on ourselves because we know that how we are today is not forever, and it's a bit of a growth mindset apply to that as well, is because as you kind of grow and as the seasons go, it will fluctuate. Does that make sense? It's just to make us less hard on ourselves. It's just a little blip in that time.
Yeah, and I think like what you just said, we were talking before we started the recording. There's a huge difference between dissociation and dealing or compartmentalizing or whatever you want to call it, right? And I think what you're speaking to is exactly correct. It's flexibility and fluidity within ourselves. It's being able to slow down enough to have a checkpoint. Like, how are you? Right? And when I reflect back, I didn't have those points of stillness. You know what I mean? I was just going and putting my head down. And it's funny because I said to someone on our team when it happened, I was like, oh yeah, I haven't been taking my supplements like consistently. They're like, Sarah's not good if she's not taking her supplements consistently. Right. But it's like, if you can't even have that moment for pause to do that, then you're not internal. You're not getting those feedback signals. You're ignoring those little dings, right? In hopes that you can somehow avoid it. And in my experience, you can't. It's going to catch up with you. Things are going to happen, right? And so it's checking in with yourself, and it might be a 5-minute pause. It might be a 2-minute pause. For me, it's even been lately as I'm driving, if there's like a path near water, I'll just pull over. I'm like, why is life so busy? I love being near the water. I love being in nature. So I'm just going to pull over and I'm just going to walk on that path for 10 minutes and walk back and see where it takes me. And I found so many parks and so many this and so many that. So it doesn't need to be that you just go on vacation for 3 months, you know what I mean? And like have to disconnect from the world on the top of a mountain. It can be these 10-minute moments as well that you come back to yourself. So, yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. And this week I've actually had the week off work, but I've been doing lots of stuff in the background, like a really good jobs week, getting lots of things done. But I went to see a client on Tuesday at her home, and I just thought we'd catch up. We were going to go for a beach walk, but I decided to go to her house. It was just for the situation. And I know she loves birds. So I took, and they're all her, like the parrots and that come into her garden. So I took these these bird seed things, and she was hanging them in her garden, and she knows all these magpies like really well. They feed out of her hand, these wild birds, absolutely amazing. And I went home and I said to my husband, I said, I've had the loveliest afternoon. We sat there just watching the birds, feeling that winter sun on your face. It was lovely. It was about, well, I say winter sun, it was about 16 degrees which is probably like a spring in England at the moment, I think.
Not our winter here.
In other winter. And we sat there, we had the most upbuilding, encouraging, lovely conversations, enjoying the birds and their little idiosyncrasies. And I thought, you don't need much. We just had she made a lovely homemade chicken soup. We sat there and we just sat in the garden and chatted for about 3 hours. And it was only because I thought I better get home because my husband's coming home from work and we'd have something to eat. But because of that, though, it was such a lovely day. And you feel, really rejuvenated, regenerated. And it was really lovely. So it doesn't have to cost anything. Just sit in the garden, enjoy whatever you've got in your local area. If it's a tree and there's a few birds or a squirrel running around, it doesn't cost much, does it? It's just taking that time out, because we won't get that time back.
Exactly. And I think like resilience is so much about the intentional choices every moment. Like that is a huge part of resilience. It's also understanding, like you and I are both saying very specifically, here's how my cup is refilled, right? If I go somewhere and there is no water, my cup is not refilled. I am a water baby through and through. That is just who I am, right? And so from that standpoint, I just know that to be true. So I choose, whether that's like cold plunge, honestly, because sometimes that's extremely helpful, or going to a float spa, or going to a hot tub, or going to the lake. You know what I mean? I know that's a huge part of that or watering the plants. It's still water. So it's like, what are you doing to refill and take those moments of presence and awareness where you're listening to the waves or listening to the waterfall and the plants or listening to the jets? You know what I mean? You're just grounded.
Yeah, I agree. And it really brings in the whole gratitude with that, doesn't it, as well? And we were chatting before, and I thought I'll bring this out because it's kind of relevant to gratitude and resilience and things. But I was mentioning, like with my sister at the start of this year, well, it was New Year's Eve actually, she had that cardiac arrest, and then she ended up being on life support. So my husband and I we were on a road trip in Western Australia. We flew back to Adelaide and then drove about 10 hours to get to the hospital in Victoria. And so when we got there, she was on life support for like about a week. So we were there for like 10 to 12 hours a day. It's Sarah, when something like that happens, all the little things that would bother you or you kind of got a bit touchy about, it all just pales into insignificance. And I sat there and I just looked at her little face, bless her, and I was stroking her arm, chatting to her. We were there for 10 to 12 hours a day. I've got to tell you something funny. The nurse said to me, if you run out of things to say, you can always read a book. To which my husband went, that's never a problem with her. And if her sister was here now, they'd be fighting.
Would you like to see her podcast? That is so funny.
So it was quite funny. But I sang nursery rhymes that my mom made for all of us, played the songs, played voice messages from everyone. And I was determined, as a real fighter that she is, that she would hear all that. And then as the week went on, they said, we'll get her out of the coma. She probably won't recognize you. Don't think there'll be a lot of brain activity left. And she proved them all wrong. Because when she came to, she said, I love you, Heidi Pie. And then my husband, she went, and Matty is cute, which was really, and we just was, oh, it really hit us. And she recognized us. But as the time went on, it's incredible watching all those machines, and the staff are like angels, are incredible. Don't know how they do it. But for like 5 minutes, they'd take her off dialysis. And then I'd go, look, you're actually beating this. You're actually like, your kidneys are working for 5 minutes. This is brilliant. And then they put it back on. So it was like looking at ways to show gratitude, because in that horrific situation, I thought we've just got to focus on the positive. And I was being told some very disempowering negative things from a couple of the doctors about her brain activity. And I thought, I am going to be doing everything I can to just talk to her, keep her stimulated. I asked everybody that made voice messages to make it proactive and upbuilding so that it would keep her emotional lifted. And I kind of look and I think, seeing all that when somebody's at their, like, the worst case scenario you can be, it just makes you so grateful that she's fitting well now. She's got a defib, just, you know, in case she has any more cardiac arrests or arrhythmias, they've got that in her. But she's doing really well. And I share that really because it's looking for something in a pretty horrific situation. And I had my cousins, my relatives that are in Melbourne. We stayed with them, my husband and I. So they were really good to go home to each night. But it's really important just to appreciate that network of people. And really, it puts everything into perspective. When something like that happens, not belittling situations that happen elsewhere, but it's really changed my view on, I don't know why people get so hung up about some of the smallest things when really you've seen somebody at their worst case.
Yeah, and I think there's something so important just even about the conversation of choosing the narrative around you, right? Because that had a massive impact in a massive situation. But choosing the narrative is also one of the hardest things you can do in the smallest everyday situation, right? Even the other day, my mom was saying to me, you know, and again, a very insignificant moment. Did you hear this about this and this and this about the news? Have you heard this? And I said, no, because I don't engage with it, because I get to choose the narrative around me. And I think so few people experience the benefits of that. And it's so powerful to hear about those benefits, right? Because they're overlooked all the time. And if you let, it's even, I was talking to a friend of mine, and this was a couple of months ago, and she was in labor. And she was like, I'm getting this message and this message and this message. And I said, turn off the lights, close the door, and tell people they're not allowed to come into your birthing suite. Unless that baby is in danger, do not tell me what is going on. And she came back to herself and she focused on gratitude and talked to her kiddo and was with her husband, and she had the delivery that she wanted, not the delivery she was told she was going to have. Right. But it's again coming back in and saying, no, I get to choose the narrative. I get to choose the outcome. Right. And even if the outcome wasn't different or was different, even if they tried to pull her off life support and she didn't have brain activity, right? She didn't make it. Not one single moment of those messages and those stories and those times you had with her would have been regretted, right? Because you got to help her have the narrative at the end of that experience. And like, obviously, fortunately, it wasn't, but
Yeah.
I think it's so easy to get pulled in the other direction and to allow the negativity to overwhelm you and to spiral. Like, look what just happened to the freaking world.
Yeah.
That is what happened. People were so terrified
Mm.
because of all they saw on the news. There were
Mm.
more people watching the news and the negative narratives during that window of time than ever in history and ever will be again, outside of other very horrific times in the world history that we're not going to talk about. But from that standpoint, right, it's you can choose the narrative in tiny moments, and you can choose the narrative in life altering moments, and you can choose the narrative from a societal perspective as well. It's just not all of us are choosing that narrative. And so there's so many of us that are still allowing the news to come in and all of that. And the reality is they're a business. So if they're getting eyes for negativity, they are absolutely going to play it. And if they're getting eyes for positivity, they're absolutely going to play it. So we get to be involved in it.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, because we're naturally wired with our nervous system to seek out negativity, because it's in service of survival, really, that it's to protect us. Going back many, many moons ago, if we were walking along and we saw something, it was just a twig, something like that. So you look and you think, but we were wired to look for that danger or that negativity. That's still inbuilt with us now, which is why negative news sells. You put a positive headline on the newspaper, no one's going to be interested. But if someone's quite objective and they stand back, and I do think with all the conditioning that people were given during that horrible time, I think it's made people wake up a little bit more and realize, if they hadn't before, that actually it is a business. There's a bias to in whatever channel is that bias. But if you actually look at it objectively, and I was sick whenever it was, sometime during those 2 years when I was sick, and I never watched daytime TV, but I must have been that sick that I put it on, and I soon turned it off because I felt like I had a relapse. And I put it on, and it was the morning news, which I never watch. I usually listen to an audio book when I'm getting ready and in the car to work. So it's usually that sort of thing I'll listen to. And the music was dramatic, boom, 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 like all this big beat. The writing had, like, it was in red, like it was all red banners coming
Yeah.
across. The stern face of the newsreader. I'm like, my goodness, if people are starting their day or they're finishing their day with that, it sets them up for the day before they've even left the house. They're wired, they're lifted, and then their lens that they perceive the world at is heightened or quite irritated. And then you think that's why there's a bit of road rage when people are on the way to work, because they've been wound up like this before they've even left the house. And yet it is just a business, and it's all about clicks,
Mm-hmm.
clickbait they talk about, don't they? Viewing figures. And now that there's so many streaming channels, the normal TV that we used to just have before all this other stuff, they are vying for your viewing figures. So they're going to do whatever they can to get that attention. And it makes people like this. It's a roller coaster of emotions. It's just not healthy.
Yeah, and you speak to that. And like, so as naturopathic doctors in Canada, we have prescribing access, we can run blood work. Like, I know it's different in different places in the world, but we are running extensive investigations on patients, and the hormones of resilience are bottomed out. Because when you get that rad fleshing light in the morning, afternoon, evening, you're checking your phone. Are we locked down? Are we not? Is school open or is it closed? Like, that has absolutely just obliterated people's potential. Not to mention, if you look on the stats of alcohol consumption increases, and you know what I mean? Like, all of these things that also happen that add to the other physiological stressors, the immune stressors, being sick, like all of those pieces, people just, they truly did. A lot of people just collapsed.
They
And
did.
I think it's such an important thing to bring to the forefront, because you can hit your knees and then you can get back up.
Mm.
Right. And that's a conversation I'm having with people all the time, is you can choose, right? Whether it's breakdown to breakthrough or breakdown to demise. That's a
Mm.
choice. And it's a rough one, but it is one. And I think there's so much power in that choice and in that conversation to say, this is my moment and not my story, right? My
Mm.
story will include this in it. And I heard someone talking the other day, and they said the difference between a villain and a heroine is that the villains take their negativity and spread it, and heroines take their negativity and make sure it doesn't affect someone else. And or their negative story, right? Their low lights, and they make sure that it's contributing to someone else's highlights. And I think that's something that you and I are always so passionate about doing, is like sharing from those scars and how we've moved through those things, so that other people know that they can move through it too, right? And they feel so deeply into the story that they can see themselves in it and be like, yeah, I can choose to break through. I may be in the breakdown, but I can choose to break through. And it's that's so important right now. So important.
And I think that's where, again, that whole thing moves like into that whole growth mindset aspect, doesn't it? Because you and I know that our whole system is dynamic. It's changing all the time. There's capacity for us to heal and get well, and things can grow, like our synapses, everything can grow. We can change all the time. And so because of that reason, we know that having that growth mindset means that we might not be there yet with whatever our intention is for our wellness or our goal of whatever it is, but we will get there if we practice that consistency. Whereas there are people that have that fixed mindset and they go, well, this is my genes, this is just the way I am, it's my personality, it's the way I was raised, and they don't want to shift. So it's kind of identifying which category we're in. And if we feel that we're in a bit of that fixed mindset, it doesn't mean that we're stuck in that. It means we've got that capacity to shift and go, actually, if you look back at what you've achieved over the time, that sometimes we don't do. We're so busy looking at what we want in the future, we don't go, oh my goodness, I've been able to do that, I've done that, I've overcome that. And then if you are somebody that feels that you kind of gravitate towards more of the negative, or you feel that you're stuck in that fixed mindset, just have a look at your past and see how much you've grown as a person, because that gives you that impetus to go, right, I'm going to move forward. And just have a little goal. And that goal could be, I don't know, it might be something like, somebody was saying to me, we were talking recently, and I said that because of everything that happened from around 2020, people just isolated more. There's more loneliness, all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I said, so when you go for a walk, do you ever just smile at someone because you recognize the same few people? And he said, no, I just look down at the floor. And I go, have you ever thought of smiling? And he goes, not really. And I said, why not? He goes, oh, I don't know, really. Maybe people think I'm a bit weird. I said, it could be. I said, but, if you see those people regularly, all you're doing is just smiling. And I said, and you're acknowledging them. You don't know what's going on in their life. And it's just part of that social engagement, which is what got lost with the whole stuff that happened in 2020. So do you see what I mean? It's kind of looking at, it could be a little goal of, when I go out, I'm just going to make eye contact and smile at someone. And then that just lifts me, builds my confidence, increases my social engagement. So it doesn't have to be something like growing a business or something like that. It could be personality traits to grow and develop.
Yeah. And I think foundationally, at the end of the day, a growth mindset is recognizing no matter where you are in life, business, health, social, like your ability to do a Sudoku, for goodness sakes. You know what I mean? There's always more there.
There are limits, Sarah, there are limits.
But it's all of those pieces. And I think it's funny. I was talking to someone the other day and they were like, yeah, but like that's just not for me. And I was like, that is the definition of being so ingrained in a fixed space that you think something is or is not for you, right? Like if you want to horseback ride, if you want to paint, if you want to speak another language, like my Duolingo, did you know Duolingo frowns at you if you don't use it for long enough? Did you know that? It is absolutely ruthless. But like, I don't practice my languages a lot. My husband happens to speak Spanish, right? That's his first language. But I have chosen to not say I'm not good. Well, I do say I'm not good at that sometimes, but like I could learn this if I was intentional. But instead, Duolingo gets so sad. You can see it just like gets debilitated. It frowns at you if you don't use it for long. So again, if I had the intention, if I focused in on that, if I really worked at that, could I speak Spanish fluently? Yes, I could. right? So it's also acknowledging that in where you are in the journey within that, right? And you might be choosing not to dedicate a ton of time to something right now, but you can ultimately change your destiny, outcome, language, environment, situation, space. Like you're capable of all of it, which is such an important piece.
And I think it's really important because I made a note here, you know, when I put our notes together, which I don't really think we've stuck to anyway, but it doesn't
So
really matter.
fun fact for everyone, I know Heidi well enough that she was like, oh, I have my notes printed and you probably have it split screens because I'm like a techie. And I was like, no, I don't even have them up because we're not going to follow them. So I was right.
And just to let everyone know, I've got here Heidi and Sarah's podcast notes. I've got all these bullet points, but at the top it says, this is just an outline. We will go with the flow, and wherever the conversation takes us, we'll go that way. With that. So
she like
but
comes
one
with
thing I
25 pages of notes and I show up and I'm like, hey, let's chat.
well, when you mentioned about growth mindset, and I've probably, with that little bit I've just said, I'm probably cutting off a little bit here, but I just wanted to bring this in because you said something and it makes me think. And I've just got, so I'm going to look at this question because it linked in with what you were just saying. And I put, how important has a growth mindset been to you professionally and personally? And I've put, do you notice the difference when working with people in business between, say, someone with a fixed mindset, someone with a rigid mindset, people sometimes that play the victim, you know, when it's always someone else's fault, or they're looking to find fault and criticize somebody else, and they don't want to take accountability, compared to somebody in your business or in other setups where there's that growth mindset? Because I've seen it, but I just wondered, have you seen it and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think honestly, you see variations of it every week.
Mm.
And I I always say I lead whether it's in my family, at work, with patients, in my friend groups. So many people have not been modeled what taking responsibility for your own side of the street looks like. Right? We're in a society right now where it's the teacher's fault. It's the police officer's fault. It's the government's fault. It's someone else's fault. Like it's so easy to pass the buck. And this is not a criticism. Like this is again, it's
No.
just a reality. But from that space, I take 100% responsibility for every situation, good, bad, or ugly. Why? Because that's the only way that I can change it.
Mm.
Even if it's someone else's behavior in my business, it is still my responsibility to be engaged with that patient, right? If someone doesn't follow a protocol, right? They don't get a result. They come back at me, you should have done it better, blah, 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 blah. In that moment, it was my responsibility to ask that patient the questions they needed to be asked to see their own stuff, right? It's not my responsibility to change the protocol if the protocol works, but it's my responsibility to say okay, why isn't it working? How is disease serving you? Right? It's staying really curious. And you will hit walls with people with rigid mindsets, with fixed mindsets. And it's my responsibility in that moment to acknowledge that, question that, stay curious around that, and leave it at the door. Because all life is the needing to have the vulnerability and confidence to fall on your face every day and get back up and learn from it.
Yeah.
That's it in health, in business, in friendships. It's you fall on your face and repair, fall on your face, learn and repair. And when I have people around me like that, who are so willing to fumble and fall and be vulnerable and make mistakes and come back and repair and all of those things, those are the people that are by far going to be the most successful. They're going to get the most out of life, right? Is because they trust their ability to get back up.
Mm.
And
It,
it's so critical.
it is, and it's interesting because like when people come and see me, clients come and see me, and they really feel, and they're like, "This is so good," and really happy, and then they say to like their partner, "Go and," you know, it's usually the husband, "Go and see Heidi, she can help you," and they don't want to be here. and they've been forced to
Mhm.
come. And I go, do you want to be here? And they go, oh no, so and so told me to. And I went, well, but first of all, that could have been an appointment for somebody who really wants to be here. Because like if I'm doing a
Mhm.
lot of things like with clinical somatics, it means that you're working with that person if it's a hands-on session. So they need to be very embodied and responsive to what we're doing together. And if they're not, it's just not going to work. And then the partner will go, I'm so annoyed. I thought he'd do this. And I say it all the time. I go, do you know what? When the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. It's like sometimes people have got to go through a lot of other stuff and they'll go, oh, I kept seeing your podcast, or I keep hearing about you from so and so. But it just keeps coming back into my mind. And I'm like, when they're ready, then they're going to be responsive.
Yeah.
And I get so many times, I've done everything, and then I'll come and see you. And then because at that point, they're usually really focused and willing to stick
Yeah.
to it. So I usually see that. And then I don't know how you feel like in a business model with like staffing and things like that. But over the years, it's been really fascinating watching the different personalities. And I know chatting with other people outside of work that are working in management and HR, and they go, some of the biggest issues really, if they could just get on with their work, it'd be great. It's the people side of it. There's a lot of issues.
I'm extremely fortunate. Again, because I've fallen on my face and just gotten up so many times that I've learned from every single situation. We do values assessments for everyone who comes into the business. If you're going to work for me, I need to know what your values are. I need to know what makes you tick, how you show up. And I've hired a group of people that value community and collaboration and education and integrity and all of these different things. So when people look around my business, they're often like, how the hell do you have whatever 50 plus people? And they get along. You know what I mean? There's always blips in the road, there's always different issues, but we have the same values. And so we are able to bring that together without the drama, without things kicking off. Because even when they go sideways, you can look at someone and say, what are you grounding in? And so I think it's a really powerful testament to selecting who you're around and the people, because I coach business owners all the time, and most people's experience is like yours, right? You almost get just deflated in the process. And very early in the game, I was like, absolutely not. I can't run a health business with an environment like this. And so
Yeah,
it's just been picking those people with a growth mindset. So to your point, because I'm so intentional and so selective, and like interviews with me, people are always like, thank you for the therapy, right? Because like I'm like in their souls, like I'm like,
yeah,
what makes you
yeah,
tick, what triggers you, what works together, right?
yeah,
It's a joke, but it's true. But that's because when all of that's on the table and you find people with aligned values who have growth mindsets, and there's growth mindsets are like a huge spectrum, right? But
yeah.
like they're
That's
on
right.
it, they're on that spectrum. Magic happens within teams, right?
It
And
does.
so it's just surrounding yourself with one or two or three people with that similar mindset that changes everything. It's
Yeah, it
so
does.
important.
And it does change the dynamic of the team because I've seen that over the time. And that's why I'm kind of sharing this, because I know there'll be other people in a similar situation over that time. And I always think I never see anything as failure. I see it as feedback, because that's again another
Mhm.
growth mindset. And the thing is, sometimes people can present incredibly well in interviews, incredibly well.
Yeah.
And then they come in, and then it can be a few months down the line, I'm like, whoa, I didn't see that. And so you start learning about specific types of personalities, and so
Oh my
and
God,
that's the
the
kind of
number
thing
of
that they can.
stories.
Oh yeah.
We'll,
And
we'll
they
get
can
into the
hide, so
third
they can do
interview.
those. Yeah, they can do an interview beautifully because they know what to say. And so
Yeah.
yeah, for that reason, it's like, whoa, I didn't see that. But you know what? I look and I'm like, for me, I look every time and go, what can I learn from that? How can I grow stronger? How can I then take empathy and compassion and consideration with other things? And for me, how can I look at this through a different lens to get more feedback and see how it could even be to support people in other settings? Because as I say, if I've been through these things, I know other people will, and that really helps you just grow again in your capacity with whatever you do in your teaching or your emotional personal growth and development. Do you know what I mean? It's all that
Oh
really.
yeah.
But yeah,
Oh
it's
no, my
been
staff is
fascinating.
always laughing because we'll get into the third interview and we'll have people that I'm like, I have a weird, we call it spidey senses. They'll be like, there's a spidey
Yeah.
sense thing here. Let me see if I can get to the bottom of it. And I'll like go and go and go. And then the person will snap at us in the interview.
Mhm.
And I'm like, there it is. You know what I mean?
I knew it was there.
But
Yeah.
it's volume and time, right? Like
Mm.
when I have as many clinics as I have and do as many interviews as I do in a week, it's just you start. I said this, and you said this earlier. When someone tells you who they are, believe them.
Yeah, that's
Like
right.
that's something I say all the time. When someone tells you
Yeah.
who they are, believe them, good, bad, or
Yeah.
otherwise.
Yeah.
But when you get those glimmers, those moments, like I was talking to a clinician about a patient today, and she was like, oh, yeah, similar to what you said. Every clinician has done everything wrong. No, like the protocols don't make sense. We're looking at it like, how did you get such a series of unfortunate care, right? And then we
Mm.
look and you're like, no, the patient told you that they're not following protocols. The patient told you that they are unwilling to do this and this and this and this. It's just we heard it from a different lens. And
Yeah.
so it's so important to just stay grounded in every, because that goes back to grounding in every moment, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do I feel? What's my gut reaction here?
Yeah.
What do I think I'm going to need to resource this person, myself, etc. So it's being in your body enough to feel those things too.
It is, and I was just wondering how we can share that point, that really brilliant learning point, with people when they're dealing with like family members and things outside of a work situation. Because I mean, I kind of think it would probably be like having those boundaries as well, because sometimes certain characteristics or personalities can try and domineer a little bit, or try and use certain expressions to trigger you, to kind of bring you to heal, as it were, that sort of thing. So it's like, how would you say you could take that learning skill to just another setting apart from work?
So I'm obsessed with a type of therapy called EMDR, and
I
it's
love
a
EMDR.
trauma reprocessing therapy. But essentially, I view there's different types of trauma, and one of them in my mind is actually beliefs trauma. You have a
Mm.
belief about yourself and you have a situation that proves it to be true. And how this relates to what you're saying is when you understand what part of you is actually having the sensation, the feeling, you again can take 100% responsibility for it. So
Mm.
if I have a family member, if I have someone in life interacting with me in such a way that I'm feeling activated, I get to look and I've done a lot of therapy, right? So I got a Rolodex in my mind of like which one of the beliefs is being triggered here. I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not capable, I'm not safe. Like what is it? And as soon as I can identify what that is, oh, this is a safety trigger, I can put my feet on the ground and renegotiate safety within myself,
Mm.
right? I can, so it again, it always comes back to you. Now, there are going to be abusive situations you need to get out of. There's going to be boundaries that you need to put in place with people where it's just like you are actively not safe. Like this is not my belief about not being safe. You are not a safe person to be around. So like there's always going to be those lines. There's always going to be those things that's fine, right? But it's still knowing within yourself where that point of activation comes from, because then you can negotiate with it for yourself, right? I can be like,
Mm.
okay, no, I am safe. I'm just not comfortable. Okay. Not being comfortable is what about the situation can I put into place to make myself more comfortable or get out of it? Right. And I think there's so much of that. This again plays into the positive parts of our culture. There's no respect authority because you have to. You know what I mean? Like, if I don't care how old you are, if you're rude to me, I'm not helping you, right? Like, whereas historically it was like you need to respect your elders and they can walk all over you and it's fine. Like I say to my 5-year-old, no, they don't get to talk to you like that. You know what I mean? So like there's
Mm,
hugely positive things that are happening in
mm,
society as well. But from that standpoint, I think it's negotiating within yourself where the activation point is coming from, and then
mm,
figuring out, is this a pattern in my life I need to deal with
mm,
and get curious about, or is this a situation that I need to boundary?
mm.
And holding that space. That's how I navigate it. How do you?
Yeah, and I was going to say, when you picked about EMDR, now when I say this, everyone's going to choose their own thoughts. So we're not advocating any of these sorts of things, but I've actually done EMDR in the past because I had to do it in order to work in clinical somatics. Because when I'm working in lots of different settings, if I hadn't sorted out my own stuff, and I personally feel like everyone should be doing their own stuff all the time, but because of that, and I deal with some very full on situations and things like that. If I hadn't dealt with my own
Yeah.
stuff, that will get re-triggered. So when I did EMDR, I remember saying to the psychologist at the end, I said, you know what? Everybody needs to do this sort of work because
Yeah.
basically at the end, what I'd say is that when you stand back, you're much more objective in situations now. So you can see when people are being drawn into this this little I can't even think of the word, but when they're being drawn into this drama or
Vortex.
whatever it is, vortex, that's the word. They're into this vortex, they're being drawn into this big drama. And because you're no longer triggered, because it's so somatic, that EMDR, it's actually more about how the emotions are being held in your body and how so many non-verbal situations, because we're so sensory, triggers and creates those responses. Because it's actually regulated, you stand back and you're like, wow. And you can be like an
Mhm.
observer in the situation and you think, wow. And this isn't a judgmental thing when I say this, but I'm like, you can see when somebody's got a very like high functioning anxiety, a very
Oh yeah.
dysregulated nervous system, and there's a lot of work they need to do themselves, because then you can see inner child behavior, all that sort of stuff. And you think, wow. And it's not to stand out and make you feel like you're better than everyone else. It's not like that. But what it does is it stops you getting pulled into it, because you're realizing there's so many scenarios that people have on a daily basis. It's got nothing to do with that situation. It's to do with everything over the years that are unresolved, and they haven't
Yeah.
created any coping mechanisms. And people can see that in family situations. If somebody's done the work and other people haven't, you start to see the contrast and think, flipping heck, there's quite a shift when you've actually done a lot of work, you've done that coping mechanisms and all sorts of stuff, but then you can see a contrast. It's a bit like that sliding doors. What would have my life been if I'd never done that stuff? It's
Well, and I always tell people like EMDR, I have different pairs of glasses, right? But it's like viewing the world from a different lens.
yeah.
Right? You quite literally, I'm still seeing you, but how do you see the world 2%, 3%, 5% differently? Right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I look different, right? I am perceived differently in these situations, but it's the exact same situation.
Yeah.
And that is what EMDR allows you, is a 2%, 5%, 10% shift in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And like I go into my therapist now and I'm like, I want to see this situation 2% differently. I don't have trauma. I don't have anything. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like I was activated by this situation. Why? And because it all comes down to patterns, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And patterns that have played out over and over and over again in different situations in your life. And that goes back to a growth mindset. Just because I've had this same pattern of communication, this same pattern of letting someone treat me a certain way, domineer, et cetera, doesn't mean it has to be that going forward. And it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that I have to be aggressive and angry and this and that to deal with it. It means I have to be regulated and grounded and look someone straight in the face and be like, that's a boundary for me,
That's right.
and feel confident and calm walking away if you need to, right?
Absolutely. No, it is. And it's that consistency, isn't it? And just ensuring that we keep on that track. And we will have wobbly days, but it's being consistent in
Oh,
that way. So, and again, I just say it because it's something that suited me, but obviously there might be people that have not liked it, or so everyone's got a different view, and that's why it's just,
if
it's
you
our
didn't
own
like it, go to a
personal
different
experience.
therapist.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with EMDR. I'm like, you might not have liked the therapist, but the modality itself is gold. Like
It's brilliant.
it, and there's a new book on somatics and EMDR. I'm not sure if you've read it yet. It's
Okay.
it came out and it's again, it's just really powerful, consistently recontextualizing the importance of somatic therapies and EMDR and how they work together. And so for anyone
Yeah,
who's interested in learning about it, there's some great books on it. I love a good audiobook as well. So
yeah,
yeah, there's
that's
some
good.
great things on it.
Oh, I love my audiobooks, I really do. So I'm just having a look through my points that I don't think we've really but yeah, I've got here, I'm just going to read point 6 out to see how if this flows. But I put consistency and hard work is the part that people don't see. I think this is when I was thinking about business and life and even self-growth and development. If you think about it, you don't have to run a business, but if you're doing a lot of the work in the background to continue to grow and, you know, develop as an individual, that's the stuff
Even
that
doing your
people don't
physio
see.
exercises. You know
Well,
what I
yeah,
mean? Like doing your somatic exercise, consistency, repetition, time, right?
it is. And because I put here like the consistency and hard work, they're not trendy. They're not trendy expressions. You know, people don't. I was like, oh, do we have to do it again? Do we have to do it again? But it's actually the bits that people don't see. It's like I was talking to someone this week and I said, when we're consistent with our health and we're really taking care and we look after our fitness and we do all of our like somatic movements and you're really mindful of what you're doing and your habits and rituals, it serves as an insurance policy because as you get older, that's when you reap the benefits because you look and you go, actually, I look pretty, I feel good. And compared to some of my peers that didn't do
Mm-hmm.
that, I actually can see that at times it was hard to really push yourself to
Mm-hmm.
do that exercise. But now I've got good bone density, I've got good muscle conditioning, you know,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. My spine is lovely and, you know, all these sorts of things. So it's something to consider. And it's about having that structure, isn't it? And then the boundaries, it's like coming back into that is ensuring that we have that time where we have that self-care outside of our other activities. If it's running an incredibly busy home with lots of kids, and if you're of the generation where you've got your children but you're also caring for your elderly parents, that's another point where you've got to have those boundaries
Mm-hmm.
and time for self-care and that consistency to if it's not going to a gym or swimming in a pool, just going for a walk around the block just to move your body, change the
Yeah.
state of your nervous system, practice some mindfulness of looking at the birds or whatever it is, smiling at somebody
Mm-hmm.
that's walking past you, all of those things just to, again, create that social engagement and bring that confidence out, you know, because sometimes if you have got a lot of stuff like that going on, your confidence is rock bottom because you're overseeing and
Mm-hmm.
taking care of everybody else.
Yeah, and so it's funny that you bring confidence into it without even it being into talking points, Heidi, because all confidence is doing what you're going to say you're going to do consistently, even when it's hard. That's what confidence is,
Mm.
right? It's when people say, how are you so confident? I'm like, I trust myself and have done the same thing so many times that I got the same result that I'm confident in it, right?
Yeah.
But I think those two things go so hand in hand. And I was on a podcast not too long ago, and I had said so many people are afraid to get started because they have quote unquote failed themselves so many times. They've lost confidence in their ability to be in integrity. But it's because you're so right. Like, it is not sexy, but getting up and doing the non-sexy stuff every day, like, is the work, right? It's
Mm.
going for the walk. It is packing a lunch. It is doing what you need to do, whatever that thing is. And there's something that's popular in North America. Apparently, it's not as popular in other places, but it's called 75 Hard. Have you heard of it?
I think I've heard of it, but it could be because I've heard about it online from somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, so 75 Hard, the person who invented it is kind of intense, fine, whatever you want from it. I think it's an integrity challenge. That's all it is, right? You move your body every day. He says twice, I'm like, yeah, whatever, right? But you move your body every day, ideally outside. You drink water. You don't drink alcohol. You choose a diet, whatever that looks like for you. It's not like you do a paleo diet. It's like you decide that you want to eat this many vegetables. You know what I mean? You choose something
Yeah.
and you stick to it. You read 10 pages of nonfiction a day and you stick to it. But you could make any list for yourself. What am I going to do? What are the 3 things, 5 things I'm going to do every day? That is how all high performance starts. whether it's in health, in business, in sports. That is how high performance starts. Every high performance person you talk to will deviate from that list and come back to it. As I said earlier in the podcast, 2023, I did not freaking deviate from that list. 2024, there was deviations because life caught up to me and I paid the toll with that. But from that standpoint, it's really just saying, this is what I want. This is what I need to do to move forward, whether that's reach outs, whether that's reps in the gym, whether that is eating enough vegetables, drinking enough water, sleeping enough hours, like whatever that looks like. And you say you're going to do it and you do it. And then you get the confidence and the result. And the result, like, I have built the business that I have right now, realistically, in 2 years. We've been in business for 4.5, but that first couple of years was the pandemic and setting the foundation. And then after that, it's like, right? But I was so friggin' consistent during that period of time. I didn't let anything derail me. So yes, consistency takes results in time, but the compound interest that you get on that is so rapid. And every single time, like, I'm probably going to do a 75 hard coming up here because I'm like, I love an integrity challenge. Like, it's just, I love getting back on track in that way and being like, okay, like, let's do all the things. But it's the amount of momentum you get in that 2-month period of time is next level. So you don't feel momentum in 5 days, you feel it in 10, you definitely feel it in a month, and you feel it in such huge ways after 2 or 3.
And I think when you mention all that, the big word that comes in for all of it as well is focus. Because if it's in your like lifestyle stuff, but in business, that's huge focus. I know you'd absolutely agree with this, but you get lots of invites and opportunities to be part or do something with someone's business. And and I'm like, no, I'm staying focused on this. And like for me now, Total Somatics, the online membership, it's so far at this point in 37 countries around the world. Now that's because I've stayed fully focused on taking care of people within the membership. I look after clients here in the clinic as well. And then I've got the podcast. So there's a lot, what it's like, there's a lot of balls that I'm juggling. There has to be incredibly structured. That's why this week off, I'm out of clinic, but I've been doing a lot of recordings and videos and filming and all sorts of things. But I have to stay really laser focused because I know if, other people have different ideas with their businesses, but they go, I'm going to add that branch onto it. I'm going to add that in. I'll have that membership, but I'm going to have that program. I'm going to have that. And it's literally, it's too many things, because when you have too many things going, something's going to get lost. And that's why I've always stayed fully focused on the membership, because my focus is, with the online arena, is to focus on the membership, see where they're at, create the content that's applicable, be fully present for them in Q&As and live workshops. And even privately, they'll send me messages and I'll send voice messages back with, support and whatever they need. If I then ran and did all these other things that I could, the shiny object syndrome, I could do them, but something's going to suffer. And it's like, I need to look after my clients here. I need to work in that cohesive manner with the therapists here. Do you know what I mean? It's keeping everything there, having my family home life, right? And so that's why it's like, focus on this. And I know my business coach,
everyone needs to listen to you in this, not me. I am sitting over here giggling for anyone watching the video. Heidi is at 200 podcasts for a reason. You know what I mean? You have been able to maintain so many things for a reason, because your ability to focus is far in excess of mine.
Well, I've got to say,
Take her path.
If my business coach is listening to this, or his wife, because she would probably give a giggle over the years from this, it was never like that in the early days. At one point, he said, Heidi, you can't save the world. Because he said, what would you like to do? And I was like, this. And he goes, you need to stay focused. And then I've got this idea, write it down. He used to go, just write it down. We'll come back to it. And I've had to train myself. But I've seen with other business models, what happens when people jump on the next thing, or it's not going on the timeline. Like you said, for years with clinical somatics, I was churning away. And it was like talking to nobody, But the fact is, it's like the consistency. You just stay consistent all the time, and then people start to hear. And during that time, you learn your messaging. You realize what people need to hear in order to be able to do that. And it's just, I love what I do. I know the results that people get. I've seen it over the years, and that's basically what drives me to create that content. And Sarah, honestly, I was talking with a friend yesterday. We went for a beach walk, and it really gets my heart. I've got to say, I get people messaging me all the time, and I don't know who these people are, but they just say, I loved your podcast today. I always look forward to it each week. I get a cup of tea ready. She was English, by the way. And she said, and I get my cup of tea ready and I feel like it's just you and me. And she said, sometimes you say things and it really resonates with me and I just have a little cry. And I'm like, do you know what? I'm in this studio at different times of the day. Sometimes I'll be here till late at night, because it's nice and quiet and I can get a batch production of a podcast done. And I look straight down that camera lens and I think, if I can resonate with one person in the world, that's all I've done for the day. So when I hear back from people, it really gets me. I'm like, oh, that's what drives me to keep fully focused, because I know that that's supporting and serving people. It's just great. I love this work. It's great.
And I want to say too, again, like we met on an online membership probably 6 years ago at this point.
I think so.
And from that space, somatics, when you hear it now, for anyone new to Heidi's World or podcast in the last year or two, you hear that stuff online everywhere these days. Somatics, somatics, somatics. And I remember it was 2020-ish. You were like, people are starting to copy me. Like there's traction, right? Like people are starting to know what this is. And so you sticking the course for as many years as you have is now reaping rewards. But like there's always going to be moments where you're ahead of the game and it feels really lonely. And I also want to acknowledge that. It feels really lonely. And then all of a sudden there's other people and you have new problems, right? And then you're kind of like, your stuff's not woo anymore and people want to be a part of it. And again, you have different problems. But I think it's really important to acknowledge, like, if you're in that space where you feel like your whole body loves something and you're driving towards it and there's consistent and you're doing it consistently, and it's not working, right? Or not working, because it was always working, but like it was not getting the traction you expected. It was not blowing up the way you expected. If you're feeling lonely in the process, that's not always a reason to stop. That's a reason to find support. That's a reason to find your crew of people around you. Like my closest business people they don't live close to me. You know what I mean? You're in Australia. One of my friends is in London, England. I've got friends in the US. So you find your tribe that holds your head above water when you're not sure why you're still treading water.
And it's true. And I think that's why, like, when we connected years ago, we were just bouncing off each other. And although we were in slightly different areas, it's still health related. But it's like, even though it's different challenges, we kind of understood, because it's very lonely when you're driving something like your goal is, to make that impact around Canada. And mine is to reach as many households around the world with clinical somatic movement. And it's tough. But I've got to say, you mentioned about the messaging. What's wonderful is that I know that people know what clinical somatic movement is, because either online clients or people that come into the clinic, they're all going, have you seen these adverts on social media saying somatics for weight loss? And I went, I know. Everyone's just putting somatic on the end of something because they know it's the marketing world. And I went, but you know what? 2 or 3 years from now, they'll jump on another word. But you know what? I'll still be here teaching the correct clinical somatic movement. It's just people. That's what happens in the marketing world. Yeah.
I was watching, what's that? Oh my God. What's the thing when you like move your body in different directions? It's not pendulating.
What I teach, pandiculation.
Yeah. Pandiculation. Yes. But like I will forever remember the first time you were trying to explain that to me. And I was like, what is she saying? Now you see it done improperly on Instagram with every other ad, right? So again, like it's okay to be ahead of that. And even I was like, I don't know what she's talking about, but like love the woman, so I'll listen through it, right?
And the thing is, as we record this thing, which I've told you about in the past, but don't let on, don't give it away, don't say anything. I'll tell you when we finish recording if you've forgotten. But there is a goal of mine that I've had for a while. I think you probably know what it is if you can recall. But it's something about pandiculation. And as this episode goes out, which will be in a few weeks from when we're recording it, it might already be live, but I'm not going to ruin it because it's a big secret I've kept for a while. But it's about pandiculation, and it's about how the whole world will get to hear about pandiculation. So it's really good, again, that I've been going on about pandiculation for years, which is, again, a scientific base. Everything's all clinically shown and demonstrated. But again, that's what is clinical somatic movement, is the process of pandiculation, not all the other stuff that's all over the social media. So that's something that I'm looking forward to sharing with everybody very, very soon. But I'm keeping my mouth shut for that, just for the time being. But it's killing me. So,
But
I was going to say,
anyone
Sarah,
who's feeling in that way, right? Like who's
yeah,
feeling lonely, who's feeling overwhelmed, just stick with it, right? The
yeah,
consistency and the hard work will be worth it at the end. And if it's not for the result and the outcome, it's who you become,
that's
right?
right.
Like I always say, at this point in business, I'm almost more interested in who I have to become to get to the next level than the next level itself.
It's interesting you say that. Years ago, when we were sanding the walls down in this entire building, which was just it's like a big warehouse with a roller door, concrete floors. My husband and I sanded all these walls. Well, he did all the painting because I'm rubbish at painting. We've got soundproof walls with all the acoustic gyprock. This is actually a shop window with the soundproof walls and acoustic gyprock or plasterboard. But you wouldn't know because it's a recording studio and it's an incredibly busy road. We were doing all of this and it was really hard work. But there was a man in the neighborhood, and he came by and just said something to me. And I always remember, and he goes, just remember, as I'm sanding away, he goes, just remember, it's about the journey, not the destination. And that's what you're just saying. I thought, it's all right for you. I've got more sanding to do. But it was true, though, that it was actually the creation of this place was just as exciting as the result of it, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know. Well, I was going to say, I think we're going to have to close up because we'll be here all day. So, and it's very late for you now. So I'm very sorry, Sarah, we kept you. And if you've stayed on to watch to the end of this episode, first of all, a huge congratulations. Go and get yourself a strong coffee. But we knew it was going to be one of these. I wanted to just celebrate it with Sarah, the 200th episode, and just have a bit of well, it's not a coffee chat, it's a green tea chat, my end anyway. And so I just wanted
I
to
just
have
got my
this time.
water.
Is that what well, it's late for you now, isn't it? So I just thought it would be lovely to catch up and really just to celebrate this 200th episode, Sarah, because it really was you and I together back in, I think it was like we did that first season in something like 2019. And it's just been really lovely to share this with you and just to catch up and see how you are. It's just any excuse, really.
I know, right? It's true. It's true. And again, like find yourself those people that life happens and you separate and come together. And Facebook never sends me Heidi's messages. And she's like not judging me for it, right? She's like, girl, we're good. Like, let's get together. So it's surround yourself with those people.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right. Well, I'm going to love you and leave you, Sarah, and I'm going to love and leave everyone else as well. And I just want to say what I'm going to do is make sure that Sarah, if you want to put all your details, I'll get all your details for where they can find you in the show notes, so they can follow you through there as well. So, but I want to just say to everyone, thank you for listening to this very special episode today. Bit different to usual. We talked about things on mindset, but we'll get back to more the clinical somatic stuff next time. But sometimes it's just nice to have a bit of a chat, decompress, and and Sarah and I have always said, haven't we, Sarah, that when we did our podcast, we wanted it to be like we were having a chat with a cup of tea and people were just listening in, so hopefully they've got some little gems today. And if you did get some gems, please share it. If you're watching this on YouTube, please share it in the details below, in the comments below, or wherever you are, let me or Sarah know privately if that suits you better, the takeaway points from today. So I'm hopefully this has been of some benefit to you, because it has to me.
So huge congratulations to you. Like a
Oh, thank you.
massive congratulations to you on 200 episodes. There are so few people that get there. And yeah, it's consistency in
Oh,
action.
thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to leave you and leave you. I keep saying I'm going to, but I'm going to now, everyone. So thank you. Until next time, all my love and my very best wishes. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and also forward this on to somebody you know will benefit. To learn more about pain relief, plus how to improve your health and well-being, go to totalsomatics.com. Until next time, take care.